Could canceling all student debt help everybody, including people with student debt and people who have never gone to college? That is a question that will be answered by our next guest, who has just co-authored an important paper on that subject. Stephanie Kelton is an American economist. She is professor of public policy and economics at Stony Brook University. She is formerly chief economist to the U.S. Senate Budget Committee, Minority Party staff, and she was an economic advisor to the 2016 Bernie Sanders presidential campaign, which is where I first got to know her, and she joins us now. First of all, Stephanie, welcome back to the program.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. And secondly, let's talk about the new paper recently published last week, I believe, entitled The Macroeconomic Effects of Student Debt Cancellation. I have read the paper, but you wrote the paper, which it means you outranked me on this topic. Tell us briefly what you and your colleagues found.
Okay, sure. So what we did was sort of a hypothetical, what would happen? That's what the report looks at. So it's, it recognizes that you've got a situation now in the US where you've got about 44 million Americans who have some outstanding student loan debt. The total is around $1.4 trillion. So we asked the question, what would happen if it just went away, right? If somehow we were able to cancel all of it, what would be the economic effects? Would the economy improve as a result of this? Would something bad happen? So it was just an interesting hypothetical for us. And what we found, I think, won't surprise anyone if you talk with someone who doesn't know anything about economics at all, and you said, what do you think would happen if people didn't have to pay back their student loans? How do you think that would impact the economy? I would imagine most people would just naturally assume that people would do something else with that money instead, and that the impact on the economy would probably be beneficial. And that's what we find.
So let's talk again. $1.4 trillion in student debt. And since I think you've done this paper, I think that's probably gone to 1.5 trillion, which, as you pointed out on Twitter, is pretty much what Donald Trump and the Republicans just gave away primarily to wealthy Americans in the form of a tax cut. Isn't that right?
Yeah, that's right. So we started the paper. This took a long time to do. You've looked at the report, so we're looking at something like 70-some pages here, and it took us a long time to produce this report, a little over a year. And when we started, it was about 1.3 trillion in outstanding student loan debt. Today, it's a little more like 1.45 trillion. So you're right, we're closing in on the 1.5 trillion mark, and that is the exact same number that many Washington scorekeepers, like the Congressional Budget Office, told us the Republicans, with their newly passed tax cuts, are adding up to $1.5 trillion to deficits over the next 10 years. So if you wanted to go apples to apples, you're looking at Republicans just having taken a move to spend, I'll say spend, the equivalent of 1.5 trillion. And as an alternative, we could have looked at the nearly 1.5 trillion in outstanding student loan debt and said, what if we dealt with that instead of giving these huge tax breaks that go disproportionately to those who least need the help?
And I would argue, go to people who already are not spending what they make, so to people who are far less likely to use it to help grow the economy through new purchases or whatever. Here's an interesting thing from the report you co-authored, Stephanie Kelton, and I'm reading from the executive summary. Peak job creation in the first few years following the elimination of student loan debt adds roughly 1.2 million to 1.5 million new jobs per year. That's a lot of jobs.
That's a lot of jobs, right? And this is a president who likes to call himself the jobs president. And what's funny is that what we find in this report is that you actually get a bigger bang for the buck. That is, the economy improves more if you cancel outstanding student loan debt than if you do the very thing that the Republicans just did, telling us that it's going to create all kinds of growth and jobs for the economy. You actually end up with a bigger stimulus through canceling student loan debt than you get with the trickle-down tax cuts that Republicans have just given to us.
So rather than trickle down, it's kind of a spread around, I don't know, bottom up kind of thing.
Yeah, it's
Uh,
bottom up, and as you said, you're directing the relief at the people who most need it. And so you're right, by canceling student loan debt, you're saying to people, instead of taking out that checkbook every month, and the average monthly payment for borrowers who are in their between 20 and 30 years of age, the average monthly payment is $351. So take that demographic and tell them, instead of taking out that checkbook and writing that check for $351 every month to pay back your student loan debt, do what you want with that money. And what do you think people are going to do? They're going to spend the vast majority of that money into the economy, buying newly produced goods and services. That's where you get the boost to GDP, and that's why you get the 1.5 up to 1.5 million new jobs created every year.
Yeah, see, to me, that's a staggering number and a very important number for the public to understand. Let's talk a little bit about it. You guys explore in your paper the mechanics of how this would work. Is it actually something that the American people can do? Because I can picture somebody listening to this or watching this on television and saying, yeah, you can't just wave a wand and make the debt go away, but you sort of can, can't you?
Well, you can make it go away, and that's what we do in the paper. And it took us quite a lot of time to explain the mechanics. How do you actually go about doing this? Some of the debt, in fact, most of it, about 90% of that 1.4 trillion that's outstanding, is already held on the books of the federal government. That's the easy part to take care of. There is additional, let's call it 300 billion or so that's privately held, and we explain in the paper how to go about dealing with that. You could either have the government buy that debt and forgive it outright, or you could have the government simply take over the payments on behalf of the borrowers. And so that's sort of what we did in the paper. We show how the government can say, with respect to the stuff it already holds, don't pay us back. We're just going to continue to say, we already have that debt on the books. You're not going to be paying it back. It doesn't make us any worse off in the sense that we don't have to add to the debt. We're just not going to collect the interest from you. Okay, and then the rest of it, we're going to take over payments for you. So what this does is actually add something to deficits. Perfectly fine. We recognize that. The Republicans just did that to the tune of $1.5 trillion. So some of it gets added to the deficit, and that's in part how it's dealt with.
We're talking with economist Stephanie Kelton about the new paper she has co-authored on canceling all 1.4 trillion plus of student debt in this country and what the macroeconomic effect would be. And Stephanie, that brings us to the issue of moral hazard, as economists like to refer to it, the notion that certain actions, if taken, in this case, canceling a debt, might result in people cynically manipulating the system based on future expectations. Now, even I admit that my own definition of moral hazard, as economists use it, is a little bit cynical, because I define it as any policy that would benefit a group of which I am not a member. But even that aside, there is a legitimate question, I suppose, that could be raised and will be raised. Okay, if we cancel all student debt, what prevents the next generation from just assuming their debt is going to be canceled too? How would you address that kind of a concern?
Yeah, it's a legitimate question, as you say, and I think that the way that this policy makes the most sense is to imagine that the debt cancellation is being rolled in or adopted at a time in which public colleges and universities are made tuition free. Because you're right, and people would be right to say, what good would it do to wipe the slate clean for the 44 million people who have outstanding student loan debt if you're not going to do anything about what's driving the problem in the first place, which is the high cost of public education? If you're not going to address that, you're going to end up in a situation where 10, 15, 20 years from now, you've got another couple of trillion that's built up, and then people are calling for another round of debt cancellation. So I think it makes the most sense to imagine this being done at a time when public colleges and universities are being made tuition free. It's already happening here in my home state of New York. I know California's got proposals that are very live right now. Other states seem to be moving in that direction anyway. So this is sort of like hitting the reset button for both the past generation that took on student loan debt to finance education and the current and next generations that will be entering college in the future.
And I guess another way to look at this is, even, and I like to think I'm not that old, but even in my day, it was a big celebration when I got a Regents scholarship in New York, because that was going to save us $250 or so a year in tuition fees, which maybe is what, $1,500, $1,800 now. So, I think the notion that going forward, as you say, there are movements to reinstate tuition-free or relatively tuition-free public higher education that existed in California for many years. It existed in New York State, virtually existed for many years. Elsewhere in the country, we have a history of land-grant colleges. So maybe pairing this with something that says going forward, people will have an alternative that allows them to go to college. But for the people caught in the middle, this is a way to approach the problem and alleviate it and do something good for the economy at the same time. I guess I would also ask you this, Stephanie. Was there anything in the research you conducted on this paper that surprised you? Were there any findings you didn't expect?
That's a good question. I think one of the findings that maybe was a little bit surprising to us is just how few negative consequences there would be. I mean, I think maybe some of my co-authors on the paper and I thought, I don't know, if you're in an economy that at the time we started doing the report, we didn't even have labor markets that are as tight as most economists think they are today. And we just didn't get an inflationary effect that if you imagine wiping away 1.4 trillion, it sounds pretty big. It's a big number. It sounds ambitious. And you think, well, these people all start spending into the economy. Surely this is going to cause some kind of dislocations that lead to problems that you don't want to see, like inflation. And actually what we found in the paper is that there's virtually no significant uptick in inflationary pressure. And as a result, little reason to anticipate that the Fed would tighten interest rates faster, that would then maybe cause other problems in the economy because you're canceling debt, but then you're raising interest rates. And so people have higher payments. What you don't want to see is that you do something that has some good aspects to it, but then it creates lots of other problems in the economy. And I think we worried a little bit early on about what the models would do. These aren't models that we built ourselves. These are large-scale macroeconomic models that are well respected that other people built. So all we really did was ask those models to tell us what would happen. And I think we were a little concerned early on that maybe they would tell us that this was not a good idea macroeconomically. And what we found is exactly the opposite, that virtually nothing bad happens and you get a boost to the things that you want to see improve, like output and employment and things like that.
Well, it's an amazing outcome. And I think, but correct me if I'm wrong, in conclusion, that it's fair to say that there are compelling economic reasons to do this, and essentially, I mean, people can argue the politics of it all they want, but from an economic point of view, there's no real reason not to do it. Is that a fair statement?
Oh, I think that's a fair statement. I think what's interesting is that we've now done the work, and so this is out there, and to the extent that policymakers are going to be looking for things to do to stimulate the economy going forward, eventually the time will come when policymakers are looking around for ideas. And something as simple as canceling all student loan debt, having the capacity to generate such an improvement in the economy, might just be one of the things that they reach for.
And to me, it seems like the right thing to do. So unfortunately, we're going to have to leave it there. The paper is The Macroeconomic Effects of Student Debt Cancellation, published by the Levy Institute at Bard, and Stephanie Kelton, co-author of that paper, economist. Thank you so much for joining us.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
You bet.